Hey, welcome to Overtime, where we take Sunday's message further. My name is Jeremy, and I'm your host. And this is a podcast where we just want to ask the questions that we think that you would ask as it relates to Sunday's message. And as we do so, we hope that it helps you grow in your life and your faith. With that being said, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of the podcasts that are coming out. Not only that, hit the like button, because when you do so, it helps us help other people. And if you ever have a question about Sunday's content or about Overtime, you can submit those to overtime@npaustin.com, and we will be sure to get to those in future podcasts. So with that being said, here's a quick recap of Sunday, and then we're going to jump into our conversation today.
In the same way that white noise masks unwanted sound, what do we use to mask our unwanted emotions? Jesus said it. Here's the way he said it. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. If you're willing to let God purify your heart, it's the pathway to seeing the heart of God. But I just know that most people will revert to the distraction. Because what we do, our natural tendency with the unwanted emotions inside of us, we just turn up the distraction. We just like, I don't like the way that feels. And so and a lot of us are living life, most of us, almost all of us are living life like this. And it's no wonder we can't think clear. And it's no wonder we go, where is God in the middle of all of this? What if you just turned it off? It would lead us to deal with your emotions before your emotions deal with you. Would you identify your white noise? Would you experiment with it? And then thirdly, would you be intentional to listen to what it's masking? Heavenly Father, how would you want me to deal directly with this emotion?
The audience might realize that you are not Clay.
I am not Clay.
And
I am an Alabama fan, but not that Alabama.
Yep. Oh, yes, you were.
You see what I did?
Yep.
I did, yeah.
Yep.
'Cause I accidentally wore burnt orange when I shared.
Yeah. Yes, accidentally, or it was a God-given
It was a sign.
thing. Yeah, it was a sign.
Okay.
Yeah. So how did you? I just say tread carefully. But how did you feel on Saturday? How did you feel about the game? How did you feel about everything? Because people really want us to talk more about the Texas Longhorns.
So so let me just preface it with I don't actually care. Like I am kind of born into a football system, and my husband is super into sports, so I care in the sense that I think it's fun to be competitive, but I don't actually have a lot of emotions tied to it, right? But it was just shocking. We were in Houston with some friends, and they were all UT fans with 2 A&M fans, who were also equally disappointed later in the day. But even though we won, it was just sad. It was a sad game. And so I talked to my mom this morning, actually, and she said that my dad was so angry, because that's where my Alabama heritage comes from, that 2 minutes left in the game, he left. And he was like, I'm not watching this. And he went out in the yard and kind of just started working in the yard. And, of course, then they, were able to kind of eke by, and he missed it. But he wouldn't have cared. He was disgusted. He was like, that was disgusting.
Wow.
Yeah. He's very angry.
Yeah. That's what happens when you win so much. You really don't know how to emotionally handle the feelings of potential loss.
Yeah, so
and then
speaking
not
of
even
white
real
noise,
loss.
he's like, I got to get out of here. I got to find something to distract myself, because I don't want to deal with the reality of these emotions.
Yep.
But no, I'm not Clay, because remember, Clay said that he had to go to a dental convention.
Yes, he only said that second service, by the way. So
Oh.
if you were in first service, you missed it. But he mentioned he's headed to a dental convention this week
Vegas.
to speak in Vegas. Yep.
Yeah. There's so many layers to that I would have loved to unpack with
Yeah.
Clay.
Yep.
Or maybe post-trip. That would be great.
Yeah.
to hear.
Well, I love what he said afterward. He said, what happens in stays in Vegas unless you go to a dental convention.
Yeah, then it's like,
yeah.
I don't know. That's a total, a different world for me. So.
And I really would have wanted to get the email that said, hey, we're with the dental convention. Would love for you to come speak. And just know what went through his mind, Yeah. In that moment. Awesome, cool.
Awesome.
Or if it's okay, this is going to be interesting. Oh, in Vegas. Okay, that's ironic.
I feel like there are worse conventions.
Yeah.
But so I think that we need to serve the dentistry area.
Sure.
People, career field.
Just like that. We serve them just by knowing what they do and being able to articulate it.
All those things that you do. That's got to be a hard field. I feel like actually someone told me one time that it's actually one of the most challenging jobs, and that people actually really have a lot of burnout and a lot of even mental health repercussions from being a dentist.
Yeah. Well, also just, people coming in and hating you before they meet you, kind of thing.
Yes.
I don't care who my dentist is. I don't like them.
No, I don't think anybody's walked around and be like, that was just the best.
Yeah.
Or that was the cheapest.
Actually,
it's
Ashley,
also very expensive.
Ashley is a huge fan of the dentist. She likes the dentist.
Okay.
Yeah,
We should
but she
unpack
likes
that.
she
We
likes
should
her
have her
teeth
on
feeling
here.
really clean.
Okay, and all the scraping and
Yeah.
the gums bleeding is what does that for her.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so
Cool.
we'll be like dinner the night before. I have to go to the dentist the next day, and she'll be like, "Are you excited to go?" And I'm like, "In what world would I be excited to go to the dentist right now?"
Okay, I bet we could find a couple more people. Not many though, but that is an odd thing.
Yep.
I
Yep.
But I
wouldn't
get it.
say that I like love it, but I don't mind it. Like I'm definitely in the minority of people that says like I don't mind going to the dentist when I have to.
And this isn't right, so I'm going to apologize to anybody that feels this way about dentistry. Like, I know it's valuable. I know gum disease is real. I know that, like, there's statistically, like, if you floss, you add years to your life, right? That's actually a stat, but it just feels like such a waste of time and money. And I know that's not
Do
right.
we know any dentists?
I do. Well, no, I know, like, dental assistants and, like, dental hygienist. Actually, I have a really good friend who's a dental hygienist. She's probably gonna be mad at me. But anyway.
I wonder sometimes, like if I go into the dentist and they're like, "Are you flossing?" I just want to be like,
You lie, don't you?
No, I don't. I say no, but I just want to be like, "Hey, let's be real for a second. Like, does anybody say yes to this question?"
Oh, I bet Ashley does.
She probably does, yeah. Actually.
I have some friends who floss after every meal. Like if we went out to lunch, like even in a work day, they would have gone to the bathroom and flossed.
Wow.
And I'm a water pick person. Do you have a water pick? Mm-mm. So I hate flossing, but I will water pick.
Okay.
Which is like it's a water pick.
Are those the little flossy things that you can use?
It's like, and it just shoots water instead of the floss.
Oh, okay.
It's a lazy flosser. And of course my dentist is like, that is not adequate. And
Yep.
I'm like, well, do you want this or nothing?
Yep.
So, this is not a good example.
No, I think we've already spent far too much time on this topic, actually.
It's better than football, though. Or is it? That's the
I
question.
don't
For
know.
some people, actually, they don't have to go to the dentist and talk about football anymore. So, but anyway.
Speaking of dentists, so Clay's message, Clay
Yes.
was here. It was fantastic.
It was so good.
It was he did such a great job, and I'll just say, he is the guy for this kind of content because he wrote a book about this content. And his book is like he mentioned multiple, like his books are more leadership based.
Yeah.
And so he has a book called How to Lead in a Distracted World, something like that. I could be butchering the title, but Clay Scroggins, How to Lead in a World of Distraction. Check it out because he's gonna go way more in depth. But I'm curious, Jen, for you, what did you take away from Clay's message? Just being out in the crowd and the audience, and
I mean, other than the fact that he was engaging and hilarious, like I really did walk away with his things toward the end where he was like, okay, so what is your white noise? Are you willing to experiment with it? And then I took very seriously his challenge to ask somebody, like, hey, what's my white noise? So
Yeah.
I totally immediately, I think actually we were walking out of the church and I was like, all right, Sal, be prepared.
Yeah.
What's my white noise? And then, anxiously awaited him to return the question because I had already prepared my response.
yeah.
He never asked. He never asked at all. Actually, I'm thinking
Does he
about it,
listen to
he
this
still
podcast
hasn't
at all?
asked. I don't know.
You should send
but
him this one
I should be like,
particularly.
you should have asked. But so we had a hard time. I had a hard time kind of really identifying mine. But I love just the idea, and even though I know we don't need Clay's permission to experiment with that kind of stuff, but just like a challenge and a push to be like, okay, so think through this. If it is your phone, if it is scrolling, if it is shopping, if it is eating, if it is drinking, like be willing, because I think
Yeah.
whenever there's anybody suggests something that's like, hey, what if you were to take that away and it causes something to jump up in you? I think, and it's so funny for me because Matt at Inside Out that afternoon was talking about emotions to the students. And he was talking about kind of part of what Clay was talking about, right? Like from the overflow of the heart is what's kind of pouring out on you and everybody else, right? And so talking with my students about it gave me a chance just to be like, hey, so if I suggest to you that you leave your phone in the car when you're coming to small group, and that creates a certain level of anxiety for you, that's like an alert,
Yeah.
right? Emotions
Yep,
are like
that's
a
a red
great
flag.
alert system,
Yeah.
right? And so, rather than judging them as good or bad or right or wrong, they're just trying to tell you something.
Yeah.
So I think that it was good for me because I thought, okay, so one of the first thoughts I had is I'm controlled by my to-do list. So what if I went a whole week without using a list? So I'm thinking about doing that. I have not crossed that bridge yet, but it was fun to think about for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
I did, I did like turning off some different notifications on my computer, but really and then just sitting for a minute and saying, okay, God, I've gotten away sometimes even from just sitting in more stillness. Like I can read my devotion and do all the things, right? And journal, even do all the physical things, but that even sometimes can be distracting for me. What does it look like just to sit with no agenda, no task, nothing in my hand?
Yep.
So it was really good for me. It was super challenging. I thought it was great. I feel like that's something we probably need to hear at least once a year. So I don't know if he plans to come back every time Alabama and UT play, but that would be a good thing.
What's crazy is that's gonna be a thing.
It's in Tuscaloosa next time, right?
Oh man, yeah, that's terrible.
That just upset you.
Go great. Yeah, no, I think that's all a lot of good stuff. And Ashley and I went home and we talked about it a little bit. And I asked her what's white noise, and she didn't give me like a strong answer, but I think mine would be like probably more like movies. Love movies. Like when I'm just stressful day, I'm just like, I just want to watch a movie.
Like a zone out kind of
thing. Yeah, just zone out and then like go to bed and wake up the next day. But it would also probably be work, like to do. Like if I'm like, oh, I got 2 free hours at home, like
I can knock stuff out.
Yeah, or if I'm like, I shouldn't watch a movie, I'm like, let me turn up this white noise instead.
Yep.
And so I open the laptop and start going, working on stuff there.
Yep.
But that's why fiction novels are really good for my soul, because if I'm reading a good fiction novel and I can go sit on the patio and read, that's like a good. But even then, that can be white noise too. I don't know. What do you do? Just stare off into a blank wall, and that's the only,
So I think one of the things that, when I'm trying to think through this, that it's not I need to find this thing and either stop it or find this thing and start it, and that's what's going to solve my connectedness to God or to others, right? Like, I think we really underestimate seasons in our life. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with giving yourself permission to be like, I've had a long week. I am just going to sit and watch a movie and not think. Now, am I going to sit and watch a movie and not think every night, right? So, again, I think everything, for me, in my understanding, like everything God hands us, right, is like a tool. And tools do great things. They build great things. They also can do damage and be destructive, right? It's how you're using it. And so I think we underestimate, for my season right now, maybe it is lists, or maybe it is getting rid of the phone, or more just silent, right, without an agenda.
Right.
But, or maybe it is listening to a podcast, right, to kind of tune out the world and really just dial in on what I could learn in that moment. But then when I do that in a way to escape, I think the question is so what are you using to not have to deal with what you actually need to deal with?
Right.
Or to what illusion do you have that XYZ is moving you forward in life because you actually don't want to think about what actually will move you forward in life, right?
Yep. I think that's a great analogy. Yeah, tools can be used for good and they can use for destruction. It's just about how you use it.
Yeah, I was teaching last night. I was teaching a young group of Christian business leaders, and I was talking to them about personality assessments. And I was like, here's the deal. They're like a tool. It's like a hammer. I can build a house, or I can bludgeon you to death. And the room was like, are those our only 2 options? There's nothing in between. But I do, it's extreme, but really, this is all this stuff is. Everything Clay shared with us. Everything, yes, you can go buy shoes. He used that, the story of the one with the shoes. But when buying shoes becomes a replacement for dealing with what's actually going on. Mm-hmm. It was funny because after Matt shared, and I have 2 teenage boys, so we came home, we had a conversation. It's part of why I like being an Inside Out. I get to hear what they're hearing. And the male-female perspective on the topic of hearing what emotions are actually happening and paying attention, my boys were just baffled. They were like, Matt shared about knowing why you feel what you feel. And he was, my youngest was like, that's definitely a message for girls.
Wow.
I was like, let's talk about that a little bit. And he was like, I totally know why I feel what I feel. And I just thought, how do I don't know how we help each other see that, but maybe we don't. I know you know what you are feeling. You feel angry. And actually, sometimes we have a hard time identifying that accurately, right? Mm-hmm. But then why are you angry? Well, I'm mad because so-and-so didn't do such and such. But is that really why you're angry, mm-hmm. right? So I think that's what Clay was trying to get us to do is you can go in all these different directions, but if you're not really being attentive to where is that really coming from, you're going to miss actually growing.
Yep. So why do you think it's so uncomfortable to turn off white noise? Why do you think we fight against that so naturally? We have a gravitational pull to not turn things down.
I mean, I think, one, we have habits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Good or bad, right? And so even like my white noise machine is actually a habit. I actually have a hard time sleeping without it now. My body is even attached. So some of this stuff becomes a body habit, right? Where you're talking about, especially when like he starts talking about smoking and drinking and some of these other substances. So we get attached physically, and I think that's really difficult to distinguish and cut off. I think we are all taught by our parents or our circumstances growing up how to navigate emotions. So if you're in a family system that's like, we don't talk about that stuff, then you've been trained from the beginning to not talk about that thing. So for sure, the white noise is like a welcome friend, because then I know I'm not supposed to talk about it. I also think one thing that we do is, if I can get to a place where I'm comfortable dealing with my emotions, I'm still scared you can't handle my emotions. So if I turn off the white noise because I want to deal with what I am going through, then what do I do? And what if my husband can't deal with what I'm going through? Or what if my coworker, my boss can't deal with what I'm going through? So it's just better to keep going than to slow down enough to feel it, because not only, even if I can learn how to feel it and I can attach to it and I can identify it and process it, I feel like sometimes we think there's a risk in actually bringing it to the light, right? Like that process of bringing something out to the light not only is a risk for me, but it's like, well, but if I tell my spouse how I really feel and what I'm really doing to numb out and how far that's really gotten, I'm afraid I'll lose them. So I think that there's, so first I think we get attached to it, whatever the it is. We get attached to the white noise or the thing that numbs or the things that mask what we're actually feeling. If we're brave enough to detach from that and work around it, then I think we have to say, okay, so now I have to figure out if I'm willing to sit with my stuff. And then there's that third layer of like, so if I can sit with my stuff, but Jeremy can't, how are we going to navigate that?
Yeah. Well, and this is 100%, I don't know, I can speak from a masculine perspective that this is like so true in men. And there's the story I've heard, I don't know which book it's from, but from one of Brene Brown's books, where she talks about this man who went to one of her, and she's the shame researcher. So it's like, all the things that the normal, macho man would never want to talk about or admit to.
Yeah.
But there's the story where he comes up to her after she spoke, and he says, like, how can I talk to my wife about this? Because I'm not allowed to say that I'm, like, scared, or I'm not allowed to say that I'm, like, struggling here, because my wife will shame the hell out of me if I do that. And so it was I think for a lot of men, and it's not necessarily like, it's just a lot of men are both communicated growing up, and you gave us the book that we're loving, or Ashley's reading it. I'm not reading it yet, but
the Emotionally Strong Boys.
Yeah,
book.
Raising
Such
Up
a good
Emotionally
book.
Strong Boys. Like, men are not taught. I mean, if parents don't intentionally teach boys how to, I'm speaking from ignorance here because I haven't done it yet, but if we don't intentionally teach our sons how to feel, then culture's going to tell them they don't have to or they shouldn't.
Yeah.
And,
or they already know. Like my son was saying, it's like, oh, I got that. I'm like, but do you really?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and that book, what I love about that book in particular is that it's not some kind of like, okay, we're going to sit and sing Kumbaya and have all these, like, we're going to weep every 5 seconds, although there's nothing wrong with some of that. But it's just teaching us to access and name and identify our emotions. And I think I may have shared with you this one time, so I'm sorry if I did, but Sal and I we've had a couple of really rough seasons in our marriage, and probably about maybe 10 years ago, I think, we hit a really rough spot. And he was kind of confiding in a friend who was a friend of mine too, and I trusted him, but it was really getting tense, and we were really just feeling disconnected. But the way what I wanted was Sal to fix it, but what I was doing was making him feel like a failure, because it was just I don't really, and it's hard for me to remember all the specifics, but I just remember this one moment. This friend of mine, he says, hey, can you come here for a second? And we were at church, and we just tucked into like a classroom, and he said, hey, Sal's been telling me some of the stuff you guys have been going through. He said, I just need you to know something about men. And I was like already like fired up and irritated, like, yeah, tell me, and he was like, if we feel we can be successful at something, we will charge every mountain. And we will go for it if we truly feel that we can do it. But if we feel like there's a risk that we will fail, we won't even touch it. We'll find a reason not to do it. We'll find a reason not to step toward that. We'll let it be someone else's thing. We'll just say it's not ours. I was like, okay. And he goes, so when you have space where Sal feels like he has failed you as a husband and he is failing as a father, he's going to withdraw.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It was just a moment for me to realize that giving Sal space without, like figuring out a way to express to him what I'm needing and what I'm wanting without the white noise, because white noise is also like gets in a relationship too, right? It's not just individual stuff, was going to be important, because otherwise if I just kept throwing things at him, he was going to kind of pull back, because he wants to be a successful husband and a successful father.
Yep.
But in his upbringing, I'm not going to go near it if I can't guarantee success.
Yep.
So.
Absolutely. And I think that there's some lines to draw in terms of verses that we find in the Bible about the heart that so align with what you're talking about, because there's the proverb that says, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it.
It's the wellspring, yeah.
Yeah. And, in that scenario, I mean, I don't know what was in Sal's heart in that, but he was feeling things that then created a flow that created something that was flowing from his heart.
Yeah.
That y'all were, wrestling with and feeling. But when you take what Jesus said, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God clearly. And then you think about guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. There are these like themes that start to kind of interweave together. One of my favorites is a man's heart are like deep waters, and one with insight draws them out. And so we get this picture of the heart that is like this thing, this like life thing that we all feel and experience, and it's our emotions, it's what we're feeling. And Brendan Manning says, emotions are neither good or bad, they're just an indicator of what's going on inside of us.
Yep.
And that's our heart, and part of guarding is both recognizing what's there and also like recognizing what is potentially coming at you and your heart and being able to do something with it. And you can't do that. To Clay's point, I mean, it goes back to what he's saying.
Yeah.
You can't do that unless you're turning down the white noise.
Yeah, every time you try and mask that, and just because I think that the Bible is so fascinating, is I just think about all that is written before science is even a thing, like the way that we understand science. So the literal heart and how then they're writing about the heart are not far off, right? How much flows from the heart and how important the heart is and how things begin and cycle through the heart. I just always love that when that happens. I'm super dorky that way, I guess, though.
No, it's fair. I mean, that stuff was written 3,500 years ago.
I mean, a chunk of time ago, before we started having, cardiologists.
Yep.
So, anyway, I'm just saying, it's cool.
Yes, it is cool. It's like Andy's, I like Andy Stanley's way. He goes, so that's how God did it.
Yeah.
Anytime there's some new discovery or something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I love that.
So, I'm curious for you when you hear about the heart and pure in heart and guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Like, how does all that resonate for you? Like, how do you guard your heart, Jen? How do you draw things out of it, understand what's going on inside of it, that kind of thing?
When I think about, that's a great question. Is that in here? Did I know that was coming? That's a really good one. I think about the process of purification, right? So I think about. And it's going to be different for everybody. I have some friends who really are guarded as to like the soundtracks that are in their homes or in their heads, the music they listen to, the writing that's even on the wall, the paintings that are in their home. Like these have a lot to do with what is kind of being, like all your senses are taking in pure things. And I think that does work for some people. I think for me, one of the things that when I feel like I am pure of heart or in a season when my heart feels clean, I've gone through a purification process. And I think different things take me through that one. Great mentors, counselors, people that reflect back to me, hey, here's what I see in your heart, because they can maybe see it in a different way, right? That's just one filter that purifies what's flowing from my heart. We even Matt challenged the students Sunday to say, hey, like go ask someone, hey, notice anything going on with my heart lately? Right? And so trying to help my girls translate that. Like, what would it look like to sit down with mom and dad and say, hey, you see anything going on in me that might indicate something's a little off inside? So, so I think using people that you trust and respect as like a purification system, I think silence and stillness. I know that for a lot of people, the idea of hearing from God is kind of foreign, right? And it was for me for a very, very long time. And I think becoming familiar with his voice, and how that feels, which just takes time and practice and silence. I think that's a level of purification for me, like letting God convict me, like actually being quiet enough to hear that voice. I do think, and this is like super spiritual disciplining, and I know that everybody will probably have, different people will have different baggage with this in terms of their upbringing religious-wise, but I wasn't raised in church. So the concept of fasting was new for me. And everybody's got all sorts of opinions on how that kind of unfolds in their life or if it should at all. But I do think there's, we talk about just setting something aside, right? Like, and saying, whether it's setting something aside and it's time that I spend with God that I would have spent doing something else, or getting rid of something in my life, like the season of Lent that we go through around Easter is really, I think, intended to be a beautiful season that helps purify us, right? Mm-hmm. So I also think that the crappy things, can I say crappy?
Sure.
I just did. That we go through are purifying. Mm-hmm. Like, I know that and I'm in a season, like, in my own personal life that's like, oh, this is like, so I'm tired. But I also know I'm being refined and purified. And so those are all the different layers. So I kind of think like a Brita filter. Like, I pour the water in and it's like kind of filtering through all these different things to actually be clean. Yeah. And so those are all the different things. Yeah. But what do you do to make sure your heart is pure?
I would copy and paste everything you said.
Okay, good.
I would say for me personally, one of the things that's been the most helpful is just a practice every morning, a journaling practice that I adopted 5-6 years ago, and I write down what I'm feeling every single morning. So and if I don't know what it is, and I've talked to people about this, it's so simple but so silly. I open my phone and I go to the emojis on my phone and I pick a face that I most resonate with, and I go, that's what I'm feeling, and then I see what that emoji is like labeled as, and I go, oh, frustration, or oh, I'm exasperated, or oh, and to get more specific, because I'm like, oh, I'm down. Like, that can be true, but like, what's going on? Like, what's the real emotion behind that? Yeah. And a lot of that has come from just counseling stuff, going, hey, practice. And I would say if someone's going like, I'm not a good feeler, I would say understanding what you're feeling is not really an ability. I think it's more of a practice, that it's a muscle that you can be trained. And I think the more you do it, the more you try it, the more you work through it, the more you're going to be able to go. And your spouse is going to be able to appreciate you going, hey, you know what? When I blew up, here's what I was feeling, and here's why I was feeling that. And I'm really sorry, because I recognize that was about me, not about you. Yeah. And I think that, and the most beautiful thing is to go, God, I am pissed today. I'm honest, God. I'm mad. This is unfair. This is dumb. And just to be like raw and vulnerable and honest with God, like we see so many people in the Bible, in the Old Testament and the New Testament, being raw and honest with God in that way. There's just a richness you get in relationship with God when you do that.
Yeah, I do think that and again, I wasn't raised in church, but I mean, so many people that were like, oh, you can't ask questions, or you can't be angry, or you can't have. Sorry.
Which, you got to fly.
There's some that there.
Yeah.
Which
read the book of Job. I mean, come on.
That's part of my favorite part about the Bible, right? I think when I started to explore different faiths and read other works, I'm like, yeah, but man, the Bible is just a bunch of human stories where people get it wrong all the time. And they get it wrong publicly. Like, it's like, hey, it's a mess. David's a mess. Like, Moses has questions. I mean, like, it's if you were going to start a world religion, I'm not sure that's a really great book. Like, I mean, what I'm saying is, like, the disciples get it wrong all the time. They ask the dumbest questions, and then and the writers knew that it was okay to put that in there, because they were telling a true story. Yep. Right, and so that's I think
full
that
of grace.
We miss that, right?
Yep.
I think being exactly where you are, turning down the noise enough to even be mad. And since you said pissed, I can say crappy.
Yes. That's good. Yeah, that's fine. I think that's okay.
Okay.
I want to point to one resource too. I was thinking about it as Clay was up there, because you're so right in that oftentimes there are like surface level emotions, and then there's things that are like really going on way under the surface. And specifically what Clay said about, I love the line when he said, when something happens, it's like those feelings, those emotions go into your soul, and they lift weights, and then they wait to come out.
Yes, I loved that. That was a great line.
Well, it's so true, because so often we don't find ourselves going like, wow, I'm so angry all of a sudden. It's like, no, I'm angry because something happened a while ago that I haven't dealt with. Yep. And now all of a sudden I'm screaming at my kid, or I'm screaming at my spouse, or I lost it on this, or I can't emotionally regulate here. Call that flooding, like flooding emotionally, where where your emotions take control and you're not able to kind of sift through and to see what's true. And most of the time, those are not related to the current incident that is happening.
I feel like, yeah, most of the time. I don't want to give it a percentage, but
Yeah.
if I kind of want to give it a high one, right?
Yeah,
Because I'm just thinking, like, even in time I've been in therapy, I remember one time a therapist saying, so tell me what emotions you feel other than anger. And I was like, I'm not angry. And then as I sat with it, I was like, oh no, I am angry. And what she was hearing as I was sharing with her what I was thinking and how I was feeling was like, she's like, you're angry. And some of the anger made sense. That's the other thing about this whole conversation is like the white noise isn't so you can hear what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
Right? Get rid of turn it down so you can hear what is actually happening.
Yeah.
Right? It's like you are already, this is what's happening. And so you can either choose to deal in reality, which is, or you can mask it with the white noise, right? But it's not, so sometimes some of the sadness that we feel, or we're grieving, or we're tired, and emotionally tired is different than physically tired, right? Physically tired actually can energize you. You like get excited. You're like, oh, I want to go on a hike again, right? But I'm tired from one. But emotional tired is just a whole nother world. So it's not that you're wrong to feel what you're feeling, but the problem is exactly what you said. If we're not accurately identifying what we're feeling, we're going to do something else with it that's not really what it should be done, right?
Yep.
Like we might take it out on someone else. We all know this. We come home, we're frustrated at work, we take it out on our kids. Like I have learned, I think, like if I'm coming in from a bad day at work, I just text my family because like I know if I don't, when I come home, it's going to come all over them, and then it's going to be a blow up that I didn't mean to happen. But when I let them know in advance, it helps a little bit.
Yep.
Because, this is why, if she's short with me, this might be why.
Yep.
100%.
And I think that's hard too. And I think Ashley and I are figuring that out right now of when I have a day that's not great and I come home, do I tell her right then and there when I walk in the door? She's excited for me to take the baby, so she doesn't need to know that I just, hey, my day was bad. She does an amazing job of like welcoming when I get home, and then we sit down at the dinner table, and then she's like, hey, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't have the best day.
Yeah.
And it's like 30 minutes into me being home, she doesn't like lay that on me right then and there.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I love about being able to do this, being able to emotionally regulate, being able to recognize what's going on, is it's a gift to the people on the other side of you.
So true.
Because it keeps so many potentially harmful conversations from happening because you're able to recognize and look in the mirror and go, oh, that's a me problem, not a you problem.
Yeah. No, I think that's really, really a good point, because I think maybe if we're thinking through this, we're like, well, I'm fine. Okay, well, but what if checking would be valuable for other people?
Yep.
What if your spouse would benefit your kids, your coworkers?
Yep.
Because you are the common denominator in all these situations and relationships. So, but if the more you know you, and the more in tune you are with you, maybe a motivator needs to be, so that things can be better in other spaces too.
Yep. And I would say I want to give a resource, because part of our hope in this podcast is that, we can talk about the content and, that was a great point, and that was a great point, but I really want people to take something from it, and I also want people to explore more resources as a result of hearing what we talk about on this podcast. And there's a great book by Andy Stanley called Enemies of the Heart. I don't know if you've ever read it.
No, but I've heard tons of people have talked about it. I think he does a good series on it, like a video series.
Yep. Yeah, I think he's done like 2 series on it. Like he's repackaged it a couple times, but it's really just, it gives you handles on 4 emotions that are really the root cause emotions. Like you might say frustrated, or I'm lonely, or this, and you can like boil it all down to I'm angry, or I feel guilty, or something like this. And he says there's 4 enemies of the heart. So when you go, I'm going to draw out the deep waters of my heart and see what's actually in there.
Yeah.
Most of the time, if there's something negative, you're going to find one of these 4 things.
Okay.
So he's distilled it down to 4. And so he says there's anger, there's greed, there's jealousy, and there's guilt. And you can distill almost any of the emotions, negative ones that are in your heart.
Can fit into one of those 4 buckets.
Can fit into one of those 4
Yeah.
buckets. So he unpacks them, and then he also talks about there's an antidote to each one of these emotions. And so with anger, it is forgiveness is one of the antidotes. So it's going through a process of forgiveness. And
I love that.
What does that look like? And forgiving yourself, forgiving another person. With greed, it's generosity. The antidote is generosity. With jealousy, it's celebration, like choosing to celebrate what others have versus being upset about what you don't have. Like, so
There's practical things. Which
Yes.
One of the things I appreciated what Clay said was like, okay, so here's three points. Let's end with these 3 ideas of like, there's things you can actually do today.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Because we do have all these like conversations about emotions in our heart and don't really land somewhere. So I love that. I was like, I'm sitting here looking, because I know that I have read a couple of really good books about white noise. present, not perfect is one.
I haven't read
there
that
was a
one.
Shauna Nyquist one. Anyway, I think that's great. I think that the Andy Stanley book, we talk a ton about the ruthless elimination of hurry on here. I think that hurry is a white noise, right? I think that was the first one the room mentioned in second service.
Yep.
So like, what does it look like down? Because I do think most of us just keep swimming is what I call it. Like, like when we have like the Dory moment where I just keep swimming until our eyes are kind of glassed over and we're like, so I think that busyness, or putting our head down, or just kind of like running forward or burying our head in the sand, anything that can kind of guide us toward, waking up out of that would be good.
Yep, 100%. 100%. So let's hone in on some of those three things really quick and just see if we have anything else to add there. So the three things that Clay talked about again: identify your white noise, experiment with it, and be intentional to listen to what it's masking. What does it mean for you, Jen, to be intentional to listen to what your white noise is masking?
This feels like a complicated question. So I guess one of the things that I think is that getting quiet and getting still, and for me, and maybe this is a personality thing, but like I almost have to do a process of elimination, like having a conversation with myself or my counselor or my mentor where I'm just like, okay, so I feel this and I'm trying to identify where it's coming from. So why do I feel this? What is triggering that? And I do think one of the things that is helpful for me is to remind myself it might not just be one thing. Because I think a lot of times we're going to turn down the white noise, we're going to find the one thing that's causing the problem. And I remember being in counseling one time, and the counselor said to me, "You're looking for the silver bullet." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You want one thing to have happened to you in your childhood that as soon as you realize it, then everything else is unlocked and done." And he's like, "Nothing in life works that way. Like, it's multifaceted in all the things." So understanding, like, when you turn down your white noise, oh, I'm angry, or oh, I'm sad, or oh, I'm jealous, which is actually probably a more common emotion than I think we realize, right? But it sounds petty to admit it.
Yep.
But you didn't just get jealous because one thing, right? Well, that person did that thing. Okay, so let's put that over here. The person did the thing.
Yep.
But why did that make you think of that?
Yep.
Why did that make you approach it that way?
Yeah.
So in
trace
my
it
recent,
back.
yeah, just and unravel it a little bit, not looking for the solution, but almost just to kind of like just to bring it to light, and to literally just untangle the mess that has been made and kept getting masked over by white noise.
Yep.
And then just say, I'm going to untangle this knot, and then I'm going to have the string, and then we'll see what we do next.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
Not trying to do it to solve something.
Yeah, it's that whole knowing is half the battle thing.
Yes.
And it's like, that's true with a lot of emotional stuff. It's like some of my best, most helpful moments in counseling or with a mentor is I'll walk out and I feel like they lit a light bulb above my head. And I'm like, oh, I've been stuck. And the information you just gave me just unstuck me. And that was like so liberating.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not a task to do. It's just the information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the knowledge to be able to go, that's why that's happening.
Yep.
I haven't been able to put my finger on it. That is so helpful.
Well, and 9 times out of 10, counselors are trained just to help you unlock the knowledge that's already in you.
Yep.
Like, they're guiding you toward your revelation.
Yep.
It's not things you don't already know. You've just operated on autopilot for so long, and the white noise just helps mask that, so you're not even aware of it anymore.
Yep.
Right? So it's not they're discovering things that you weren't smart enough to figure out. They're asking great questions that help you. They are, for me, like a good counselor is just turning down the white noise.
Yep.
And it's in a space in which you paid to have the white noise turned down.
I was going to say really expensive question askers.
It is. But the two things that would be so great for us for self-care is counseling and like massages. But they're so stinking expensive. I get it. But I'm not sure how we don't need to like invest in that. Because when you think about like, oh, my kids are going to be in therapy because I've messed them up so much. Well, maybe if you start with therapy first, we could like minimize some of those bills later. I mean, everybody's going to have a wound, right?
Yep.
Everybody's going to have something they're processing, which is part of the point of life and that refinement. God never promises that everything is going to be great and you're not going to have negative emotions. In fact, I don't think God really identifies emotions as negative or positive, right? Like we talked about earlier. So I love that. I love that, just the idea of sifting and letting that kind of come to the surface and realizing like it's just a space to do that in counseling.
And I think for a lot of people to recognize that as a very spiritual thing to do.
Yeah.
I think some people go, oh, that's the emotional health stuff.
Yeah.
And it's no, oftentimes, as Pete Scazzaro, I reference often in emotionally healthy spirituality, says that like you're only going to grow spiritually as far as you're willing to go emotionally. And like you're going to hit a ceiling if you don't deal with the emotional part of you, and that you're not going to grow spiritually anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's in, even though I know that some of that stuff, because I think you and I talked about between the interruption thing and Clay's content, like it can feel a little self-helpy, like a little new agey kind of like, mindfulness. I think all those are very valuable.
Yep.
I do think it's ironic though, sometimes when something is just very true, it's like, that's just true.
Yeah.
Like, so for me, because I think that comes from God. I think if God is truth, then that totally makes sense that would be true. I know that it's gotten kind of like, borrowed and used and amplified in different ways, but it's still just so true.
Yep. Well, it's like, every 10 years there's going to be a book about hurry that comes out that changes everything.
And isn't it amazing how we're like, what?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Yep. And Jesus is like, my yoke is easy. Yeah.
I said something about this a while back.
Yeah, exactly. And Andy Stanley has made a lot of comments about that. Like every self-help book is just reinvented every 20 years.
Yes.
And we're all like, oh my gosh, that's the most amazing. I'm a culprit of that for sure.
No, but it's just good because it's just God using his people. God's like, well, I just had to, I need to explain this to you again.
Yeah.
And you might need a fresh analogy.
Yep.
Right.
100%.
So like even some of the stuff Jesus taught us, it's totally seen even in the Old Testament principles, right?
Yeah.
But Jesus is like, you just couldn't hear it that way then. So I'm going to try and tell it to you this way.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
But yeah, that is funny. We do get like, oh, this book, it changes everything. It's like, yep.
Last question I want to finish on.
Okay.
Is something really significant that Clay talked about in mentioning parents and grandparents not dealing with white noise. This is far more significant than I think we give it credit for. It was such a small point in his message, but I mean, goodness gracious, like it's generational sin. It is things that are passed down over and over and over and over again. And Buck just told me today, you're either going to pass it on or you're going to pass it down, and you got to make a decision on what to do. And so, but the default is to pass it down because it's the way we've grown up, it's the way we've been taught, it's the way our brains have literally been wired to view the world this way. And so turning on the white noise, we wish sometimes our grandparents would have done it, or we wish our parents would do it, because then they'd get ruthlessly curious, and then a lot of relational pain and trauma and stuff like that would probably be lessened to a certain extent. How is this significant to us? How can we begin to deal with generational sin, turn down the white noise, address what's there, be the one to finally stop the cycle of whatever it is? It could just be control, abuse, alcoholism. It could be a number of things. But at some point, we got to go, hey, I'm going to be the one who doesn't, I'm going to pass it back. I'm not going to pass it on.
Yeah, I think is a super true point, right? And psychology tells us this, sociology tells us this, the Bible has been telling us this forever, right? I think that generational things are real. And so I think if you're like, I want to pass this on, not pass it down, like Buck said. The question I would ask is, how would your kids, or those super close to you, if you don't have kids yet, but like since we're talking generation, let's just kind of stick in that lane. How would your kids respond to when mom gets stressed, she fill in the blank? And then ask yourself if you're okay with that response.
Eek.
Right?
I don't want to ask that. And Grayson can't even talk
yet.
He's not,
no. And it could be a myriad of responses. It doesn't, but like and be honest enough with yourself to say, if I really asked my kids, when mom and dad fight, this is what that looks like. When dad is stressed, this is what he does. So if you picture them sitting with their small group leaders or their own counselors or whatever, or their friends sitting around going, oh man, when my dad had a bad day at work, he, oh man, when my mom and dad got into it, they, So the thing is, you're going to have a bad day at work, and you're going to fight. And I think we have this myth that we got to hide all that from our kids. Actually, the best thing we could do is fill in that blank with the answer we would want for them in their own lives. Now, I can't control if they accept the answer, right? Like I can want my kids to, when they get stressed, they, go for a walk and have, sit down in a moment of stillness, right? Like I can't make them do those things, but they're sure not going to do it if they never saw that modeled for them. And so I think that if you want to be someone who says, I want this to look different, first, know what you picked up from your parents, right? That might be a good moment of awareness. But then 2, just decide, I'm going to live this this life this way. So this is like not the same, but it kind of worked for me. So after I had Parker, I gained so much weight before I had the boys and then after having the boys. But when Parker turned 4, a friend looked at me and was like, it's a thing. Like, you need, like, actually he said, if your kids were running out in the street, I don't know that you could save them or help them.
He said that?
Yeah.
This wasn't your
It
husband?
was not my husband. My husband would have killed him. But
yeah,
no.
yeah. I
no.
was like, Sal would not be here with us today.
No, and he was struggling with it too. So it was, I think when I finally had the courage to step on the scale, I was like well over 260. And so what happened in my mind, I would love to say, first of all, I'm not anywhere there where I'd like to be, like, physically healthy, but, like, I would love to say it was for my own good that I started doing things, and it was for my own good that I started incorporating different habits into my life. Honestly, it just wasn't. But, man, when I looked at what I wanted my kids to say about me, there were 2 things I wanted them to say. I wanted them to say, Mom got up every morning and she worked out, and I always saw her having a quiet time. And those were important to me. And so I feel like God was like, then you should maybe do them. And so it just started a journey where it was because I wanted to pass on something better, right? So I think that's a great starting point for people who are trying to, like, figure out generational stuff. Like, fill in the blank. I want my kids to remember that I want my kids to remember that my husband and I dealt with conflict this way. They saw us talk about it. They saw us ask for forgiveness. They saw us get frustrated. They could see we had emotion and we didn't hide it, but we never insulted each other. But we never raised our voice at an insane level. We never threw arrows like we can sometimes verbally. We never brought up things from the past. I mean, everybody's got a different blank to fill in, right? And so I think that even just journaling, that would be cool. Like, I want my kids to remember, Mom always did this. Mom did this when she was stressed. Mom and Dad fought this way. I think that could be helpful. And then start doing those things. And when you fail and you don't do those well, get right back up and try doing them again.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so good. I think maybe we should delete the first everything else in the podcast and just, like, maybe just play that 5-minute chunk.
Just do that. Okay.
Because that was, I mean, that's so, like, I got to go home and do that for sure.
Yeah, what do you want? Grayson's, my dad always treated my mom like.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Like,
right?
Yeah, I mean, that is such a convicting, gut-wrenching, but good question to ask.
Good.
And I would say
Now I'm going to have to go do it.
Yeah. Oh, man. Bummer. And I would say what you said there, and do it, is so important. Being in this job for a number of years and just being a human, I've sat across from people who tell me their whole life story and they tell me about their mom or their dad, and they're going to go, but I'm never going to do that. And I just always want to be like, what are you doing to make sure you don't do that? And they're trying really hard. And as much as I would love to say that, like, willpower is enough, it's not. It's knowledge. It's inviting people in. It's humility to understand that if you don't do something different, you probably will do those very same things.
Yeah.
And it's taking those steps of humility and asking for help and doing the kind of things you're talking about that are really good, in hopes that one day, we do turn the white noise down well enough to where, because what you're talking about is an exercise in turning down the white noise.
Yeah.
And we're able to do that in such a way that we do break generational cycles of sin or whatever it might be, so that there's something more beautiful that can come as a result of the lives we live.
And I think ultimately that's what changes the world. We keep looking for this thing that's going to change the world and bring world peace. It's like, but generation after generation getting healthier, and we'll eventually get there. It's hard. Yep. It's a hard journey. And I want to caveat that kind of with some grace. Like, say, and go do it, but know that you're not going to do it perfectly.
Yep.
And so I had a friend who was like, I'm never going to diet because I fall off every diet, so I'm just not going to diet. And I'm like, well, I don't know how helpful that is, right? So just keep trying. And you are going to, this is just like a parent note, no one is a perfect parent, and no one raises perfect children. They just don't. It doesn't exist. Maybe I'm saying that to myself right now, Jennifer. No one is a perfect parent. I have like teenage sons, right? And so you're going to mess them up. They're going to have a story, and God is bigger than that story. But I am not accountable for how my sons turn out, but I am accountable for the kind of parent that I try to be. Mm-hmm. Try to be. So, like, fight for it.
Yeah.
Do the best you can.
Yeah, perseverance over perfection.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. I want to read a quote that's been really impactful for me, and I think I read it on the podcast before, but as we turn on the white noise and we see what's there, oftentimes it means there's some work to be done, and we need some hope. We need like a picture of the future that's helpful and encouraging for us to do it. And this is from a book called, it's specific to family, and it's from a book called Take Back Your Family by Jefferson Bethke. And I'll just read it, and then we'll end with this. But he says, be encouraged that God absolutely wants to heal all the trauma and brokenness and pain and shards of metaphorical glass stuck in your soul when you think about the word family. But it won't be instant. It'll be more like planting an acorn that we are called to water and faithfully attend to, knowing our children's children might be the first to stand under its shade, and that is worth the work. I just think that's such a great, great quote. Yeah, something that gives me a lot of hope and excitement about, as Buck says, sitting on the porch one day and rocking and sipping something, as he talks about that. Like, hopefully one day we'll be able to see, children's children being able to stand under the shade of breaking generational cycles of sin and going, I'm going to do something different.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the goal.
Yep. Awesome. Well, Jen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Talking
thank you,
white
Clay.
noise. Yes, thank you,
Good
Clay.
luck with the dentist.
Yep, exactly. Yep. We're going to be kicking off a brand new series this coming Sunday called Relevant, talking about the church and Big C Church and Northpoint Church. And if you've had bad church experiences, I think you're going to relate a lot with some of the content in this series. So,
can we do a survey for how many people have had a bad church experience? Because
it'd be pretty.
I think we don't have to even survey.
It's probably
real.
the majority. Yep, yeah. It's a lot of them. But anyways, we're doing that. Part 1. Going to see you guys either in person or online. We'll see you then.